Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I am Yogi Doug Johnson. I'm a yoga meditation teacher, ordained minister, and a certified Kilby's inquiry facilitator. And today I wanted to follow up on a talk I gave a few weeks ago, and that talk was about helping yourself before you help others. And I just wanted to elaborate on some of the concepts in that talk, some of the ideas in that talk, to really clarify. So this talk is really about how do you actually help others. And this is from a spiritual perspective, a spiritual outlook. I'm not really talking about specifics in a given situation. That's really not what true spirituality is about. It's not a play-by-play. It's not a play-by-play book, like in this situation you should do this, in this situation you should do that. I feel like that's sometimes what religion is about, and that's fine. A religion is a belief system. It is something that often comes packaged with being raised in a certain society, certain culture. Nothing necessarily wrong with religion, but like many things, it can be abused and misused and misunderstood. But true spirituality really has very little to do with that in rule books and do this in this specific situation, and if this person does that. Again, I know there are religious books like that, things like that, but for me that's not really what spirituality is really about. In fact, in the story of Jesus, there's a story where, again, they find somebody who is sinning, and they propose stoning them to death, which is that was the custom at that time. If someone was sinning, you caught them, you go ahead and stone them to death. And Jesus points out, okay, well, let one of you that is without sin go ahead and you can cast the first stone. So he's pointing out there that this whole rule following, it's not really possible. We're human beings. We set up rules to try and structure society to make things go smoothly for us, so that people don't do egregious acts to one another frivolously. But, it doesn't really matter what the rule is. Someone is going to break it, maybe innocently, maybe just because they feel that they have to, that they don't really have another choice. So, again, I think Jesus was pointing to this. Even though his teaching eventually sprung a religion, Jesus was a spiritual teacher. He was not trying to found a religion. He was trying to teach spirituality. And so this is an important thing to understand. So today's talk is not about the specifics of how do you help someone in trouble, or should you help this person or not, but a spiritual perspective or concept of how do you truly help others, and really honestly, how do you truly help yourself? The principle applies in both directions, you might say. And one of the best sources for this teaching is going to be A Course in Miracles. So if some of the concepts I speak about here interest you and you want to do a deep dive, then I highly recommend reading and studying and practicing A Course in Miracles. I'll try and put it in very simple terms. Some people find A Course in Miracles really impenetrable, very difficult to read, very difficult to understand. And if that's you, that's okay. Many people have made entire careers out of just trying to interpret and simplify A Course in Miracles for the average person. So Marianne Williamson is somebody like that, and there are others as well who basically their whole teaching is just teaching A Course in Miracles, but making it so that the average person can understand it. I personally prefer just to read the Course directly. It's just a deeper experience for me, and I don't have trouble understanding it. Okay, so the principle of today's talk, again, the main subject is going to be, how do you actually help others? Well, the way you do that is by seeing them as whole, as strong, as perfect, maybe even not needing your help. Now, depending on the specifics of the situation or the individual, you may or may not be able to communicate this to them directly. But it's a very important thing. You really want to teach people about their spiritual strength, their spiritual wholeness, because our true nature is whole. And it is strong, it's indestructible. Like Jesus said, the flesh is weak. This is true. This flesh, all matter, all form, that which can be named and seen, is ultimately weak. It's fragile. It's changing constantly. It is coming and going. It is born, and it is born to die. It will die. It will disappear back into the formless. This is the nature of reality. There are no exceptions to this. But what Jesus and other teachers like Buddha were trying to point us to is the formless, our true nature, our eternal nature. And this is indestructible. It is ever present. It is undying, unmoving, unmanifest, unknown. We really can't put a finger on it or understand it. So the more that we tune into this ourselves, which is why I sort of, in the other talk I gave on this subject, recommended helping yourself first, is because if you don't understand your own strength, your own invincibility, immortality, power, then you really can't teach it to others. But interestingly, what the Course tells us is that by teaching it to others, you learn it, you have it. So again, these are not mutually exclusive. Helping yourself, helping others are very much intertwined, interrelated. They are not separate things, they are together. Okay, so again, we can separate them in theory, but in reality, they aren't completely separate. So, belief is a very, very powerful thing. Okay? And usually we're asking others for help when we feel weak, when we feel vulnerable, when we don't feel strong, when we don't feel like we have peace. So, in a sense, other people can use your help when they're asking for it, because generally we don't ask for help unless we perceive one of these things. This is a bit of a generalization, so don't take that too literally and don't apply it too strongly across the board. You know, if we're sitting at a big table and I ask you to pass the salt, I'm asking you for help. But it's not like, oh, well, he's asking for salt, so he must perceive himself as weak and vulnerable and frail and incapable. No, I just don't want to reach across the entire table, right? So let's not, again, we have to keep all these principles in perspective. We don't want to get too dogmatic with any of them, and we don't want to apply them too rigidly in all circumstances, okay? But generally speaking, when people are asking for your help, they are feeling weak and vulnerable. They are feeling small. They are usually very much identified with ego, and they are very much unaware of the power of spirit. And their belief at that time is that they are weak, or they are frail, or that they absolutely must get help, or whatever it is. Now again, whether or not you would point that out to somebody depends on many, many things. That's not that important. Again, that is something that you should leave up to what we might call your inner teacher, what A Course in Miracles calls Spirit or Holy Spirit. We all have it. In yoga, it's called Ishvara Pranidhana, and this is sort of our inner guide. Chances are, if you've been listening to my talks or following me or been a student of mine for a while, it's because that inner guide guided you to do that. It's somewhat unlikely that your rational mind listened to one of my talks or took one of my classes and said, hey, yeah, this is awesome. This all makes perfect sense. I'm going to follow this guy. Usually it's kind of more of a knowing. It's kind of a remembering, if you will. We hear spiritual teaching and something inside us recognizes the truth of it. We can't explain why. And that's very important. Spiritual truths, they're not always logical from the perspective of the ego or the physical world. In fact, oftentimes they contradict what seems like truth in the physical world. It's not saying that they're not true or they're not verifiable. It's just, I don't know if they're so easily, if we can easily apply the scientific method to them. And there's a very good reason for this. So this isn't an excuse. It's just the nature of what spirituality is. Well, what is spirituality? Well, I really like the way that the yoga tradition calls it a subjective science. So what's a subjective science? It is the science of the subject, right? Not the object, the subject, okay? What's the difference? Well, an object is anything that you're aware of. The sound of my voice, this image, a sensation in your foot, this chair you're sitting on right now, the computer you're watching this on, or the phone or the device that you're watching this on right now. Those are all objects, right? And this also includes things like your own emotions, your sense perceptions. Obviously, I mentioned some of those. And pretty much everything you experience is an object, okay? There is, however, one thing that is not an object. That is the subject, right? Who or what is experiencing these things? Who or what is experiencing these things? This is very much the question that most spiritual traditions are seeking to answer, okay? Who or what is experiencing these objects? Especially in the East, this is made quite explicit, but I would argue that even in other traditions, if you look through the right lens and you know what to look for, you'll see that the same question is being asked and answered through the teaching. So this is what we're interested in, the subject. Now here is the trouble. here's the difficulty. Science studies objects. By definition, it studies objects. It studies things that we can see, smell, taste, touch, measure, right? It does not study things that you cannot do that to. And that is the nature of spirit. That is the nature of consciousness. That is the nature of awareness. Now, people are trying to develop methods to study these things with greater or lesser success. Maybe one day we'll be able to with real accuracy. But generally, science has been concerned with objects, not the subject. So what we refer to as science is objective, an objective science, a science of objects, of things, of forms, of studying forms, of studying phenomena. Yoga, spirituality, is the study of the subject. Okay? So this is what I teach about. This is, again, what I think Jesus was teaching, what Buddha was teaching, and this is what we're interested in here, the subject rather than the object. So in general, the ego will identify with objects. My body, my thoughts, my emotions, my belief, my religion, my nation, my stuff, my job, my career, my story, my legacy, my history, all of this stuff. All of these, I hope goes without saying, are simply objects. Over time, through spiritual practice, we'd like to soften this identification with objects and instead start to identify with the subject more. And this generally starts our spiritual journey when we're able to start to do that. For some people, it's very easy. It might even happen spontaneously. They're not looking for any kind of spiritual experience. And pa-pow, all of a sudden, they see the truth of this. For other people, they may even be born with this understanding or awareness. It may not be conscious in their mind, but when they hear very deep spiritual teaching or truths, they might be like, oh, yeah, that's obvious. Of course that's true. For others, it may be a real journey and really difficult to realize that. So it can take a lot of work on some people's part. And again, it's not about good or bad, or smart or dull or spiritual or unspiritual. This is just the case for some people. So regardless of how long it takes us to come to this realization, once we do, most people require quite a lot of work. Certain things might drop away, like you might stop identifying your worth with your car. That's a very sort of superficial one. But some people actually do that. So again, it may sound silly to you, but it may not be silly to someone else at all. They might take a lot of pride in the type of car that they drive. They might take a lot of care for their car because it's an extension of themselves. That's the way they see it. Another thing that can happen is you stop identification with the body. This doesn't mean you stop taking care of your body. Why wouldn't you take care of it? Just like why wouldn't you take care of your car? But there can be a softening again of obsessing with it and thinking that that's the most important thing or the only thing. Then a little trickier for some people is thoughts and emotions. So Eckhart Tolle once said in a talk that he feels that men tend to get stuck identifying with their thoughts and women tend to get stuck identifying with their emotions. I think there's some truth to that, validity to that. Of course, he was generalizing, so there will always, of course, be exceptions to every rule, and you may be that exception. But what's interesting is in the yoga tradition, we don't really make a distinction between thoughts and emotions, not in the hard way that in the West we often do. So you can think of those as basically two sides of the same thing. So once this really starts to take hold in earnest, usually we begin developing a different relationship with thought. I've spoken quite a bit about this in the past, but it bears repeating because it is a kind of core teaching that we can start to question our thoughts, and that's called inquiry. And there are lots of different forms of inquiry. I've talked quite a lot about it recently. And if you'd like to do some inquiry with me, reach out and we can set up some sessions to do that. But inquiry takes many forms, okay? And so it's just, again, kind of questioning our beliefs, our thoughts, looking at them, really making them conscious rather than just unconscious assumptions that we assume are true, okay? So things, beliefs, I'll just throw a few out. One might be, I'm getting old and getting old sucks, right? A lot of people, without questioning at all, will just take that as a true statement. They'll think that, yep, just getting old sucks, just sucks, period. That's not been my experience so far. My body is definitely aging. It's definitely changing. It's going through what we call the aging process. For most of my life, I had abundant health pretty much effortlessly. Didn't have to do anything. And I was healthy and thin and happy, relatively speaking. And these days, it's not like that. I have to put a lot more energy and effort into it. But it's actually allowing me to learn a lot about my body and about how to help others with their body. So I don't really see it as a negative or a problem. And in some respects, I feel healthier, more vibrant, and more alive than I ever have in my life. So after this softening of identification with thought, we can begin to do inquiry. And questioning thoughts is a very important thing. And then also encouraging thoughts can be very important. Encouraging certain beliefs, encouraging certain ideas. You might think of ideas and thoughts like little seeds, and you can grow them in your mind. You can cultivate them with a little bit of effort. Now, some people might say that you can control your thoughts. Not sure that I believe that. I don't think we really can control anything. In Zen, there's an expression that if you want to control your cow, give it a large field to graze in. That's a certain kind of control, right? So if you try and tackle your cow, if you try and, hold it, you're only going to be able to do that for a limited amount of time, right? You might be able to control it for a little while, but it's going to require a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And of course, you can like pen it in or something like that, but then it's probably going to be very unhealthy. So the best kind of control is basically giving it its natural setting or environment, right? I think in my experience, this is also true of thought and indeed of anything. If we really had control over our bodies, would anyone choose to die? I mean, a few people might, but I think a lot of people, if they had their choice, right, they wouldn't be choosing death, sickness, illness. They wouldn't choose anything other than an absolutely beautiful, pristine physique. And few of us look in the mirror, other than complete narcissists and egoists, look in the mirror and just love everything that we see. Most of us would choose something different. So again, what kind of control is that really? So many of you heard me say in the past, we don't have control, but we do have influence. And I think that this is the right word and the right way of thinking about these things. We don't have control over anything, but we have influence over so many things. So when a farmer plants his seeds, he doesn't control that process. I'm watching a very entertaining show right now, Clarkson's Farm, which is Jeremy Clarkson, who's a self-proclaimed petrol head. And he's basically from Top Gear, British show about cars, 3 perfectly grown, in fact, somewhat elderly men, and they're obsessed with cars. They're like little boys with cars. Very entertaining television to watch. But what they've done is they've taken Jeremy Clarkson and put him on his own farm. So he owns a huge estate in England, and even though he owns it, he's never farmed it himself. But this show is about him doing that. Well, you very quickly figure out, watching that, if you didn't know already, that farmers aren't in control of their crops. They have very limited influence, but they have zero control. So in the first few episodes, there's way too much rain, and then in the next few, there's too little. There are all kinds of problems that arise on the farm, and any farmer who's telling you they control what's going on, they're just not in touch with reality. And this is true of anything. This is reality. This is what's called being spiritually awake from the spiritual perspective, is we recognize this. Just like the teaching of Buddhist impermanence. Impermanence is just a fact. Some people say, well, I don't want to be a Buddhist because I don't like this idea of impermanence or suffering. Those aren't ideas, those are just facts. That's just someone pointing out something that's true. So we could say, well, I don't like your idea because you think that the sky is blue. It's like, it just is. It's not my belief, it just is blue. And, there's nothing we can do about it. And this is something that in modern times is really an important concept for us to really grasp, is there is such a thing as a fact. So sky is blue, impermanence is real. I defy anyone to show me how impermanence is an incorrect teaching factually. Not your belief, not what you'd like to believe, not what you'd like to, not what upsets you, right? A spiritual concept that's upsetting, even though it's true. So like that film, An Inconvenient Truth, sometimes we don't like the truth. We don't like what it's telling us, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true. So once we've learned to put some distance between ourselves and our possession of our thoughts, our defense of every thought, an idea that appears to us, or our belief that just because a thought shows up, that means it's true, that means I need to defend it, that means that I need to find evidence that I'm right. This is what an unawake mind does. And the mind is very good at proving itself right. It's very, very interesting. So once we have that distance, we can begin to ask, is this a useful thought? Is this a thought that makes me happy? As strange as that might sound, a thought that doesn't make us happy, very often we can find an opposing thought, a different thought, that is a different way of looking at a situation, a different perspective, that we find makes us feel much better. Why not choose that thought? Again, many of us would come back and say, well, that's just not reality. But usually it is. Usually reality has many different perspectives. Some might paint a picture negatively, some might paint it positively, and some might be quite neutral. So what many people don't realize is that they do have a lot of choice and a lot of control over their beliefs. Just because an event happens, like I get a flat tire on the way to work, the thought might come up in my head, today sucks. Well, if I grab hold of that thought, that idea, and I believe it, I don't question that thought, then again, chances are my mind will find plenty of evidence, and I will push out of awareness, ignore opportunities that I have to cheer myself up, to gladden myself, to feel better, to not feel that I'm a victim, versus just playing into that thought, really believing it, picking up on every little negative thing that happens, focusing on that, amplifying that. So this is again where the mind is like a garden and thoughts are like seeds, and we can choose to which seeds we're going to feed, which seeds we're going to cultivate, which seeds we're going to grow. So just the other day, a student shared with me a Native American, I believe, story of Native American origin, and it's one I had actually heard before, but I've never shared it with students, so now might be a good time to do that. The story, and I'm probably not going to do it justice, but was basically a grandfather was talking to his grandson and saying, you have two wolves in your mind. One is a light wolf, a strong wolf, one that's going to lead to joy and happiness and peace. And you have a dark wolf that will pull you into hell and cause you to suffer. And the young boy asks his grandfather, and the grandfather says they're in combat, they're constantly fighting. So the young man asks, well, which one wins, grandfather? And he said, the one that you feed. So this is wisdom, okay? This is real wisdom. It doesn't really matter what tradition it comes from. This is someone, whoever shared that story first or came up with that story or that idea, is someone who is very wise. They understood what human happiness and health requires. So the one that you feed. So this is a great thing for you to ask yourself, is which wolf are you feeding? That's sort of the nature of what I was pointing to somewhat in the other talk, is you need to feed the good wolf, okay? You need to starve the bad wolf. And for most of us, that requires spiritual practice. That requires a certain amount of slowing down and mindfulness, paying attention to our thoughts, to our mind, to what's going on. But then the nature of today's talk I want to talk about is, are you feeding, which wolf are you feeding in others, okay? And when you are feeding the bad wolf, the scared wolf, the one that is going to pull someone into hell by helping them believe they are a victim, that they can't help themselves, that they need you or others, or that someone has victimized them beyond repair. You are helping them feed the dark wolf. When you understand your true nature and you can hold that, and then you can interact with someone who's maybe asking for help or needing help and hold their true nature, then you are truly helping them, irrespective of what you're doing. So again, if someone's asking you to lend them money, whether you do or don't isn't really the subject of this talk. It may be appropriate to lend them money, it may not be. That depends on many factors. Again, we definitely want to be very conscious of the motivation behind something like that. And this is again where inquiry can come in very helpful. Why, if I feel I need to lend this person money, why do I feel that way? If I don't want to lend this person money, why do I feel that way? You know, how am I maybe justifying that in my own mind? Because most of us will do that. So again, these are practices. These are things where we can slow down and begin to ask these questions. So this is truly helping people, seeing their strength, their invulnerability that comes from their true nature. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect is going to be helping them cultivate strong beliefs, helping them cultivate or plant those seeds in their own mind that will really strengthen them. I recently had a few bouts with some, I don't know if it was illness, or I've been experimenting with different kinds of fasts and maybe I didn't do everything quite right. So I got kind of sick, I felt bad, and the thought would arise, you know, oh, I'm sick, oh, I might not get better, I may have to ask for help or coverage at work, all these kinds of things. And when those thoughts would arise, I've just gotten in the habit of A, noticing when that happens, B, questioning those thoughts. Is that really true? Do I really know that? No, I don't. And then replacing them with thoughts of strength. So I would just say to myself, no, I'm really strong, I'm really healthy. Now, some people might refer to this as positive thinking or positive affirmations. I suppose it could fall in that category, but it has a lot more to it than that. A lot of the people I see who talk about positivity, positive thinking, positive affirmations, they often, the sense that I get is they're simply trying to drown out the negative thoughts that are quite persistent in their minds. So it's like they're trying to overload or override those thoughts. And I think one can do this to, you know, a certain level, a greater level degree of success, but ultimately I think it will fail because the unconscious must be dealt with by the conscious. So if I have a deficiency story and I do not handle or deal with that deficiency story consciously on a conscious level, then chances are it will manifest even if I have some quote-unquote success. So a very quick example of what I'm talking about is, let's say I have a deficiency story that I'm not good enough. Again, deficiency stories, everyone, are usually unconscious. So there are people who walk around thinking I'm not good enough consciously, but a lot of people, this is just going to be under the radar. They're just going to have this feeling in their body or this sense of, you know, unworthiness. So this is unconscious, and what they decide, again, possibly unconsciously, possibly consciously, is that what will make this feeling go away is going to be $1 million. So they begin working hard to get $1 million, okay? And as they make headway, they feel good, they have successes, right? They have moments of kind of, yes, I did it. They have moments of joy, but the moments are fleeting. They don't last. So they come and go pretty quickly, and then they're off again. And they might make $1 million and then think, I still don't really feel worthy. I don't feel any different. And again, this isn't necessarily conscious, so it may not be worded that way. They may just feel like, I don't feel satisfied. I don't feel right. I don't feel settled. I don't feel like I can stop. And so they make 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, a billion, 2 billion, 4 billion, 8 billion. And there's just still this sense of lack that's there. Well, from this perspective, that sense of lack will never go away until they deal with the core deficiency story. Again, spiritual teaching is not so much about what you do. So is it wrong to make $1 billion, $8 billion? No, of course not. Is it wrong to have a beer? Of course not. But if I have a beer and I'm an alcoholic, then it may be a problem. If I make $8 billion because of a compulsion due to a deficiency story, that may be a problem. So again, this is always about context and drivers and why we do what we do. So the money thing is just one example. There are many, many others: relationships, love, all these kinds of things, right? Many people think that a relationship, the right person, that's going to fill that void or that hole. And the truth is, nothing will. Not from the outside. So, from this perspective, the way to truly help people, irrespective of the form, right? What we're doing in the world of form. Do you lend them money? Do you not lend them money? From a spiritual perspective, that almost is inconsequential. Do you give them advice or not? Do you take them out and console them? Again, I'm not saying these are completely frivolous or unimportant, but more important is what's going on inside. I think everyone has heard Eckhart Tolle talk about spirituality as an inner journey, right? And we all are understanding more and more the journey inward. And so, again, what does this mean? It's talking about how we think, how we feel, how we perceive the world. And there are basically two ways of perceiving the world: nirvana and samsara. We can perceive the world as blissful, and we can perceive the world as hell. And so Jesus pointed to this. He said that the kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth, but people don't see it. It's right here in front of us. But based on our perspective, we will not be able to see it. So that's a great thing for us to question. Do I see this as heaven? Am I having an experience like that, or do I see this as hell? You, again, may say, well, I just see things how they are and they suck, right? I have times when things are going well and then they suck. But again, from this perspective, this may have much more to do with how we are seeing our experience, not the experience itself. How we see the experience, what we believe it's saying about us and about life, and those types of things, and how we feel about that. And again, what I want to impart upon you today is you have a surprising amount of influence over that, not just in yourself, but in others. So again, when someone comes to you and they need to be consoled and they feel weak and they feel small and they feel fragile, you may be able to find subtle or sometimes not so subtle ways of sharing with them that that's not actually true, that they're much more powerful and strong than they ever have imagined. And you may be able to start planting seeds. Again, thoughts are like seeds. So you can perhaps begin to plant some seeds of belief in them that they are much more capable than they have ever imagined. And capable, I'm really just talking about capable of peace and joy. You know, I don't care what you do. That's up to you. What do you enjoy doing? What do you want to do? What do you need to do? So coming back to A Course in Miracles, A Course in Miracles basically teaches us that there are no mistakes or coincidences. We are always teaching, always. And we just can choose what we're going to teach. That's all. We can't choose whether or not we're going to teach. And I find this to be very true. So again, when I am trying to help someone, rather than focusing too much on form versus content, another thing that the Course goes into quite a bit of detail about, what matters in the world of spirituality, which is what I'm teaching about, okay? In modern times, some people really try and tie spirituality with things like fortune and fame and money, and they say if you're a good Christian or you're a good Buddhist that you're going to make a lot of money or be famous or have huge success. I don't know about all that. Okay? I don't know about all that at all. So some people get drawn into spirituality thinking, oh, I'm going to make a zillions of dollars by being spiritual. Again, I don't know. For me, spirituality is about peace, joy, love, compassion, fulfillment. Whether that takes the form of having a lot of money or not, I think for some people it might, but for many people it doesn't. Surprisingly, we as human beings need very, very little to be happy. And you might say that maybe we're happier with less, at least sometimes. So just keep that in mind. I know some of you might be laughing or scoffing at that idea, but you might be surprised. I have some stories and experiences from life that might surprise you. So what am I teaching someone when I'm helping them? Am I teaching them they are small, that they are a human being limited in a body, that they have limited resources and limited talents and limited beauty and limited everything, and that they're going to need to fight the world and others to get their due, to get what they need, to get what they want, to be safe, to be happy? Or am I going to teach them that their true nature is beyond all of that, and that all of this is manifesting the way that it should? I don't know that that word should is really the right word, but it's manifesting as it is, as isness. This is a Buddhist concept, suchness, tathata, okay? Things just are as they are. They're beyond the realm of good and bad, the concept of good and bad. They just are, okay? We human beings, as human beings, we may have a personal preference, or even as a species, we may have a preference. But from that vast universal perspective, there really isn't a preference. There really isn't a good or bad, ultimately. It all just is. So since it all is, can we enjoy it? That's really the question. And for me, that's really what spiritual teaching is about. It's about heaven. It's about nirvana. It's about enjoying the experience you're already having. You're already having the experience, okay? All your attempts to avoid it will just create suffering for yourself and possibly for others. You're already having the experience. However horrific it is, however sublime it is, however beautiful it is, however It is. It is. It's happened. It's happening. It's continuing to happen. So the question is, can we get in line with what's happening? That's what the Taoists mean by the way, the Tao. Can we enter into the stream of life in a conscious way that allows us to appreciate and enjoy what it is? Because it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. When you put the human judgment aside of what should and shouldn't be happening, and I'll just ask, where do human beings get this stuff from? A lot of people, cultures will say, well, God told us that, it's in our book. We have to question that. Again, we need to question whether those ideas are actually accurate or they're just myth or lore or whatever it is, okay? Other than pointing to a book or some oral tradition, you really don't have a way of showing me an absolute right or wrong from a universal perspective. From a universal perspective, maybe it is right that human beings get wiped off the face of the earth in the next few decades. I can't know that because maybe what comes after is so much more beautiful than the human experience. Who knows, okay? As a human being, I don't want to see that happen. But again, that's a personal, human perspective. That's not a universal perspective. All right, everyone. So I hope you enjoyed today's talk. And if you've made it this far, awesome. And please like, subscribe, comment if you're on YouTube. And if you do want to support me and the community, please check out Patreon links below. You can choose to support for as little as $1 a month. Help support me in making these videos. If you have any questions, reach out. If there's any way you think I could be of help or service to you on your spiritual path, please reach out. Otherwise, until next time, namaste and have a beautiful day.